The Miami Dolphins host the New Orleans Saints in Week 13, and we have you covered here on a crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Network.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Network. I'm Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Dolphins. He is Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, also my boss. So we're going to have a fun time. And he's also one of the guys with a better lighting setup than I have. So we're going to bring it today on a crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Network. Want to thank everybody for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. It's an awesome honor that you all bestow on us, those of you who are our everydayers. We appreciate each and every one of you. Today's crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Ross, it's great to see you. How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. And look, even though we have an organizational work structure dynamic here, I want to be very clear. You do not have to talk nice about the Saints because I am not going to. And so we're going to be in the same boat here. Glad to be here with you, man. Always love doing crossovers with you.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And we don't get to do them too often, but we did get to do one 2022, 2021.
Yeah,
21 was the last time. So it hasn't been super long, but it has been a long time since the Saints have played at this stadium. I did not realize the last time they played at Hard Rock Stadium was in 2009, the year they went on to win the Super Bowl. And then their 17 game was moved overseas. So
that was the London game.
Welcome back to South Florida for the Saints. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd be a terrible host as the home team if I went first here. What's the vibe on the Saints right now? Kind of first year with the coach and Kellen Moore and a bunch of young quarterbacks trying to figure out what they had. They made a quarterback change not that long ago. What's some of the biggest storylines in New Orleans right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing right now is that you're just kind of waiting to see this New Orleans Saints team, particularly over on the offensive side, figure itself out. This is a team right now that has looked lost on offense more times than not. And look, that makes sense. You have a first-year head coach who's also your offensive play caller. He's a first-time head coach. You made a quarterback change partway through the season, and now you have a rookie quarterback starting behind like 2/5 of the offensive line that you planned to have on the field at the beginning of the year. So there are pieces of context, nuance, all of those things to all of that. But at the same time, you've been looking for incremental improvement from this team over on the offensive side of the football with an offensive mind leading your team. And you've not seen that improvement here. So the offense has been a bit of a letdown so far. And so they need to prove something, dare I say anything at all, in terms of a sense of progress up against Miami this weekend and really throughout the remaining 6-game stretch this year. To me, that's kind of the biggest thing everyone's going to be watching as the season rolls along.
Yeah, I think these two teams maybe at different points in their life cycle, where New Orleans is just starting a head coaching build. Miami's trying to figure out what the future is with their head coaching, Mike McDaniel. But I think that the last 6 weeks of the season for both teams, there's some pretty strong overlap in you're evaluating things. You're trying to figure out what you have, what you can build forward with, what needs to change. And I think that's for Miami a major storyline as well. Sitting at 4-7, like you can think about last year, they were 2-6 and got back to 8-8 and had a chance in week 18 for a playoff berth. And if Dolphins fans want to dream of that, that's fine. But for me, the consuming of thoughts is in what's your situation with your quarterback? You've seen some evolution from Mike McDaniel as far as the identity of the offense. It took him 3.5 seasons to put 6 offensive linemen on the field. They're a part of this massive trend that's across the league right now to go with heavier sets, and they've had great success with it. Their pass rate over expectation is one of the lowest in the league, so they're running the ball at a higher clip, which people have been asking, Mike, you're a former run game coordinator. Why don't we get back to our roots a little bit, take some of the stress and pressure off? And the injury to Tyreek Hill in week 4 feels like it's kind of been this catalyst of change by force. Not that you wanted to change, but you kind of had to change. So that's where for Miami, the parallel to New Orleans is the next 6 weeks. You had progress. You put your first winning streak together, 2 straight wins before the bye week last week. what can you sustain? What kind of confidence
Mhm.
can you build? And Miami sitting at 2-7 or 4-7, they've won 3 of their last 4 games. They're middle of the pack per True Media in offensive and defensive EPA since week 8, which
Mhm.
was kind of where this team started to show some life. They're 14th in offensive EPA, 12th in defensive EPA, and they're top 5 in special teams EPA. So that progress that you're talking about looking for from New Orleans, Miami's kind of started to find it, but now you have your bye week with a young team. And I think that's the really interesting thing from the Dolphins going into this game.
What has been the, some teams, some coaches are really good off the bye week, some teams, some coaches struggle off the bye week. What's kind of been the measure around Mike McDaniel when it comes to, off the bye week so far?
Yes, they've all kind of felt like they've come in different chapters and different
Mhm.
times of the year. Um, I think the biggest thing for Mike that he's talked about this week and last week when he had his presser when they got home from Madrid was this year's team. A lot of the growing pains they had was figuring out what their practice week needs to look like to apply it and put their best foot forward on game day. And he said, because of that, where in years past, maybe there was an interruption that did negatively impact the team.
Mhm.
He feels this year's, because it was the growth has been in the build up to the week and your process and how you go about your day to day. He feels confident that it's going to
Mhm.
sustain itself. But for a coach that you're evaluating how good of a finger on the pulse he has of his team, I think this is a great measuring stick against a team in New Orleans that has been struggling to kind of come out of the bye and say, okay, did you win 2 games to get too big for your britches? And now all of a sudden, like,
Mm.
you're going to come out flat because you're feeling yourself a little bit?
Mhm.
Or are you going to sustain that? Because Mike went on the record with what he thinks is going to happen. So I think that's a great eval opportunity for Miami in this game.
Yeah, that's huge. I remember here in New Orleans early on in Sean Payton's tenure, going back to then, that early on the team struggled out of the bye week, and then he changed his approach, and then he became very successful off the bye week. It was a little bit of that balance of like, do you give these guys time away, or do you put them through the rigor, have them in the building, and all those other pieces? And then he kind of struck the balance of what worked for him. And so
Yeah.
I'm always curious about that from the young, particularly offensive play caller, head coach perspective. Kellen Moore's offense did not look good coming off of the bye week, but does that change in 2 years, in 3 years? And so interesting to hear where Mike McDaniel is in that process.
Yeah. The phrasing that the coaches used this week was that it was time away, not time off.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
liked that, right?
Yep.
And Anthony Weaver, who I want to talk a little bit about for his matchup in this
Mhm.
game, and he was one of the finalists that interviewed for the Saints job.
Yep.
We'll talk about that on the other side of the break, but he said it was applying, what can I do with my time away to apply myself and get better whilst also not sitting on, he used the analogy sitting on the couch for 6 days playing Call of Duty. So,
Oof.
anytime you can throw something like that, it's like, okay, yeah, like you get where your guys can go if you let them go there, so don't let
Yeah.
them go there. So we're gonna get into a lot of the matchups for this game on the other side of the break, kind of looking at the X's and O's, the personnel to know, the coaching elements of it. All that stuff is coming your way next here on this crossover Thursday on the Locked On Network. Make sure you guys stick with us. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on all of the action than over at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or if you want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team is making that late game push. And Dolphins fans, if you were on the bye last week, hopefully you took advantage of FanDuel to keep your sports weekend exciting. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I want to thank everybody again for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. And it is your teams every day. You know, you dream up a league with a team that you love, we got a show. We don't just say it, we live it. So, Ross, matchups to know in
Mhm.
this game. Anthony Weir, who we mentioned before the break, was asked a lot about Chris Olave and what he brings to the table as kind of you trade Rashid Shaheed. Alvin Kamara is not quite the same version of himself as what he was in his prime. Chris Olave's kind of been the catalyst of big plays within this offense. Would love to hear from your perspective how he's doing this year. I know there's been some concussion and head injury issues there. How has he managed to mitigate hits to stay on the field? And then how important is it for him to get rolling early, and how do they like to get him rolling early?
Yeah. I'll start with the injury thing because it was such a big part of his offseason in particular. And I think two specific things helped him quite a bit. The first of which is that he put a lot of focus over the course of the offseason of building up strength in his neck. So he spent a lot of time working on kind of the shoulder to neck area. So and to explain why that is, it's like, okay, he's got head injuries. What are you doing worried about the neck? If you end up building sort of the muscle there, the theory is that you're able to absorb some of the hits and kind of spread out a little bit of the tension. If you do fall to the ground, you have a better opportunity to engage in those muscles to keep your head from hitting the ground, things like that. He did a lot of work when it came to that over the course of the offseason, as well as some additional bulking up as well, a little bit closer to 200 than he's been at any point throughout his career, either NFL or collegiate. So I think that a lot of it was the offseason focus on muscle growth, muscle building, muscle groups, as well as bulking up altogether. I think that was a big part of it. And honestly, I think that the other big part of it is leadership from a guy that's not on the team anymore in Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks has played his entire career as a smaller, not bulky at all, deep threat, speedy wide receiver, and has dealt with a fair share of injuries throughout his time as well. But basically, it gave a little bit of leadership to the room. But look, you don't always have to take the hit. Sometimes when you need 10 yards and you get 11, fighting for 12 can end up putting you in a bad situation. Take the 11. And so finding situations like that where they can kind of balance these things out, and balance, I truly mean, because Chris early on in his career had this habit of catch the ball, go down, right? Not wanting to take any type of contact at all. And that probably dates back to, I'm assuming and speculating when I say this, but probably dates back to some of the head injuries that he suffered during his time at Ohio State, coming, during his collegiate years. And then kind of got to a point where he was a little bit more aggressive, hunting some more of those yards after catch opportunities, got hurt last year doing that. And then, or not necessarily doing that, but got hurt with that being a part of his mentality. And then now maybe has struck a little bit of a balance. The way that they like to scheme him up, Kyle, no surprise, is move him around as much as possible. Sometimes he's in the slot, sometimes he's at the X, sometimes he's at the Z. You're moving him around a whole bunch of ways and allowing him to run a full route tree from wherever it is that his deployment is. So taking advantage of his ability to be able to run an entire route tree, that's been a big part of what it is that they've been doing with him. The issue around his usage last week against Atlanta was that Atlanta was able to focus entirely on him because there aren't really many weapons left, especially after Alvin Kamara went out with a knee injury in the first quarter of that game. But then even towards the end of the game, as things started to lighten up, still put up 70 receiving yards by the time that it was all said and done. So it'll be interesting to see how much Miami devotes resources to him and how the Saints look to potentially counteract that as best as they can, knowing the limited amount of weapons that they have over on the offensive side.
Yeah, I think that, and that's for Miami. They're a team defensively that has had these service interruptions at key spots, and the secondary, Rasul Douglas gets hurt and he comes out, and Juju Brents, who is a former top 50 pick with the Colts that they got off waivers, starts 2 games and looks great. He goes out late in the Commanders game. He's done for the season. Well, the expectation is Rasul Douglas was close against Washington from playing. Now he's got the bye. So Rasul Douglas probably goes back in, but like the hero defensively from the past game was Jack Jones, who I think physically moves and can probably mirror and match a little bit better than what Rasul Douglas can. But the Dolphins are one of the higher rates of teams of playing cover 2. So I'd expect they'll look to play a roof on in that regard, and maybe try to get hands on inside the contact window for Chris and kind of force stuff to the middle. But I think that's where what New Orleans has from a personnel standpoint kind of work in the middle of the field, whether it's the backs or whether it is the tight end room. I know I looked at their tight end room before the start of the season. I said, we got some guys in here that can go a little bit. Now, maybe not all of them weren't healthy at the start of the season,
Right.
or Taysom Hill and him coming back from a major injury, or Juwan Johnson's getting paid handsomely, right? And I got a nice extension. So those are the kinds of matchups where if they try to funnel Chris in that regard, I'm then looking to how are you tackling these other weapons that play in the middle of the field where there's more to space. And if you're going to play high over the top, there's more ground that you have to cover to tackle.
Yeah. I think the Juwan Johnson factor is going to be massive in this game. It's so funny to say this when we're talking about a guy that is now on his third contract at tight end and a rookie quarterback. But both of those guys, Juwan Johnson and Tyler Shuck, were teammates in 2019 at Oregon. And so they have a great connection. And while Miami has given up the least amount of receiving yards to wide receivers in the NFL, they've given up the sixth most receiving yards to tight ends in the NFL so far, according to Pro Football Reference. And so for the Saints, that's got to be a place where they're looking to take advantage or finding a moment to exploit and seeing if they're going to be able to do that. That's why I think that watching how Kellen Moore and this New Orleans Saints offense scheme against this Miami defense is going to be very important, because the avenues are there. Can you show that you can take advantage of them?
Yeah. How about on the other side of the ball? What's a matchup that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think that the other big thing that I'm going to be looking for in this one is going to be whether or not this New Orleans Saints team can hang with Miami's run game. I mean, the run game in particular over the course of the last two wins with Devon Achane and the way that this guy plays, I mean, they've been spectacular so far. And the Saints have been on like a week on, week off kind of schedule when it comes to run defense. They surrendered over less than 100 yards rushing just a few weeks ago before they took on the Chicago Bears. They gave up 222. Then after that, they gave up less than 100. Then they gave up 171 to the Los Angeles Rams. They did a great job against Rico Dowdle and the Carolina Panthers, and then over 120 given up to the Atlanta Falcons. And honestly, when you're going up against Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, 120 is pretty okay in a game where you're trailing by multiple touchdowns for most of it. However, now you kind of look to see, okay, this is an on week for the run defense. Are they going to be able to really, kind of make it happen here? And so I think that's going to have to be a big part of what it is that the Saints defense is looking to do, as they've improved under defensive coordinator Brandon Staley throughout the season and shown some promise. But a lot of it, in terms of the catalyst of a game's worth of success, as opposed to just strong success to start, really comes down to what they can do on the run game. Yeah.
And my eyes for Miami in that regard go to this heavy jumbo personnel package that the Dolphins have had, where they have historically been a very 21 heavy team with two backs, one of them being a fullback and a tight end. But the regression that they have seen in all phases in 21 personnel from 2024 and 2025 combined, that the league's highest percentage of snaps in that personnel package since the start of 2024, they are the league's worst EPA per play of any team. While that has been the identifying personnel grouping of your offense. Now, in 22 and 23, Mike McDaniel first got there, they were several standard deviations off the chart in a good way for EPA per play out of 21 personnel. So 23, 24, no longer applicable. That part of your offense has withered on the vine. And their answer has been they've leaned into multiple tight end sets, one of them being an offensive tackle. They're averaging they the fourth highest usage of 22 and 22 jumbo with an extra offensive lineman on the field. They've got 72 snaps of it out of the season, and that has grown since week 8 against Atlanta when they had no healthy tight ends and they kind of had to use it. It's been a bigger and bigger piece of every week since. They average 9.6 yards per pass attempt, and they average almost 5.5 yards per carry out of this personnel grouping. And it's funny because we mentioned the Tyreek Hill injury and that impact. Miami had such custom to Miami defensive game plans that they would get versus, like, you could be a cover 3 team till the cows come home, but you play Miami and the book is we're going to play physical on the outside. We're going to play cover 2. We want to limit the speed and interrupt the timing of the offense. Tyreek Hill goes down. They suddenly are able to manipulate defensive personnel packages and coverage shells based on their formations in a way that they couldn't when Tyreek Hill was also out on the field. So that's, for me, like, what's really interesting about how they have evolved and leaned into this is it's been out of necessity. It's been because they haven't had as many prolific weapons, but it actually allows you to get a little bit more predictive looks out of opposing defenses. And that being a game that they will look to play against New Orleans and the continuation of that, what did you self-scout during the bye that gives you new layers to use and implement in this game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be huge. The New Orleans played against the most 13 personnel reps last week against Atlanta than any defense has seen since like 2016, according to Next Gen Stats. And so that's what Atlanta did. They went heavy, and the Saints have struggled against that. You look at things like 22 personnel where they're surrendering 4.6 yards per rush against. You look at things like 13 personnel where they're struggling or have struggled quite a bit against that as well, giving up 4.2 yards per rush, and then also allowing over 40 yards per game in a very, very seldom used personnel group. That's how much like they've struggled against it. And so when you put those bigger bodies out there and you make your offense bigger than the Saints defense, it's a typical football rule: be bigger, be better. And in some cases, the Saints have struggled to prove that they can be otherwise. And so sometimes, man, those injuries, it's interesting how that can help you diversify your approach over on the offensive side. And so maybe Miami with that injury learned a little something about itself, and it'd be interesting to see how the Saints match up against that.
And we are going to explore the keys to victory for both teams on the other side of the break, as well as a game prediction from both Ross and myself. Locked on Saints, Locked on Dolphins. We got you covered. Make sure you guys stick with us here on this Crossover Thursday. Keys to victory here. Saints at Dolphins, 1 p.m., Hard Rock Stadium, Sunday, week 13 in the NFL season. Hard to believe we're already into the final third of the year, but here we are. It is flying by, and for both of these teams, some fans are probably more interested in the offseason than the games left to play. But let's remember, you're going to wake up in the middle of May, and you're going to say, man, I really wish football. No matter what. No matter if you're 4-7, 2-9, 10-4, whatever, you name it. So we are going to revel in these last few crossovers that we can get this season. Ross, I'd love to hear from you on the keys to victory for the New Orleans Saints against Miami on Sunday.
Yeah, for me, honestly, it's one key. And there are things that are always going to be built in, right? Getting pressure, forcing turnovers, that's always going to be built into these types of conversations. But really, for me, it's one thing that the Saints have to do. And it's on the offensive side. Kellen Moore's got to get out of his own way as a play caller. You were talking a little bit about the injury to Tyreek Hill and how that has helped to kind of diversify the offense. The Saints have done this interesting thing here recently to where they got Taysom Hill back, but don't really know how he fits into their system. And they're still kind of figuring things out with all that. And so it's like getting him back. There are times where they put him on the field almost because they feel like it almost feels like they're putting him out on the field as if they're obligated to put him out on the field. Like, this is when Sean Payton did it, so I guess we'll do it too. Like that kind of attitude, as opposed to something that's specifically built for the moment. And so they've been taking Tyler Shuck off the field in the red zone, for instance, where the Saints are one of the worst teams efficiency-wise when it comes to touchdowns in the red zone in the last decade. Out of the 320 seasons that have been played over the last 10 years, 32 teams, 10 years, 320 seasons, the Saints are 317th in red zone percentage at 34.7, according to our friends over at True Media. And so it's like, that has been a big time struggle for them. So it's just getting out of your own way as a play caller and being creative, doing the things that got you this head coaching position in the first place, that got you a Super Bowl last year as an offensive play caller with the Philadelphia Eagles. The leap from coordinator to head coach is very, very complicated and very, very tough for a lot of reasons that people don't think about. But it's something that every one of these guys has to prove that they can do. And I think that if Kellen Moore can settle in a little bit and just be Kellen Moore as a play caller, do the things that got him to this point, as opposed to being worried about feeling like he has to do certain things out of obligation, and instead just focusing on putting his assets in the best possible position to make plays, then I think that that's going to be a big key for them. If they can't do that, they have no chance to win this game. I give them very little chance to win this game if they do, but the only way they're going to have any semblance of a chance is if they can do that.
It's interesting you mentioned that red zone rate. Of all of the defensive statistics that do not inspire you about the Dolphins, they're fifth in the league in conceded touchdown rate in the red zone with just a 50%. They've allowed 40 trips to the red zone, only 20 touchdowns. It's the fifth best percentage in the league. So that is
I believe like 0 for 4 in the last 2 wins as well, in terms of not surrendering touchdowns.
They've been very good. Like the game against Buffalo, right? And the book when the
Yeah.
Dolphins play the Buffaloes, hey, we really play inspired more often than not, but you don't make those few plays at the end of the game. You're leading 16-0 at halftime against Buffalo. They go down 7-minute possession to start the second half. Josh Allen throws an interception in the end zone. Like that, they never do that against that team. So that was kind of the first inkling of like, okay, like they have got a little something going here that's uncharacteristic for them. And I think that being a strength that you continue to lean on, I expect New Orleans is going to have opportunities to move the ball. They are a little bit of a bend but don't break defense, the Dolphins are. But the challenge is when it tightens, whether it's you have an offensive procedural penalty and now you get a third and long, or you get down the red zone and the spacing gets a little tighter and the timing gets a little faster, and you've got a rookie quarterback making just one of a handful of starts in his young NFL career. They're a simulated pressure defense. They like to show you a picture before the snap. The last couple of weeks has really been where you start to see them get exotic with their rotations because they've had so many new pieces in the first portion of the season that, hey, we can't line up birds on a fence here. Like we're going to bring 8 guys and bring all this pressure and then have everybody drop out and hit their landmarks and play cover 2 out of it. Well, that was what was really good about the Dolphins defense down the stretch last year. You started seeing some of that against Buffalo where they were able to confuse Josh Allen. So that changing the picture post-snap and getting to the down and distances that can allow you to show aggression, but then change the picture post-snap on Tyler Shuck is one of those keys to victories for me. And then offensively, it's just minimize the high stress reps for Tua Tagovailoa. And they've leaned more into the screen game. They've been a much more run in neutral down rate team than what they've been in years past. Tua's had a little bit of a regression as far as some of the decision making, as far as the accuracy is not always there. The footwork feels like it's a little bit off at times this season. It comes and goes. And if you're able to have the success running the ball, load up heavy, and reduce those high tension reps for Tua, I think that's a matchup or an element of this game that's essential for Miami to not give New Orleans extra life.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how you need to play, right? Let's not do anything that's going to make life easier for New Orleans, and let's try to be methodical with how we play.
Yeah. The Saints are a low pressure defense, although they've gotten better since Chase Young has come back, and he's been excellent since their return. The key is though that when they get pressure, unlike last year, when they get pressure, they are getting to the quarterback in time and they are getting those sacks. And so Miami as a team that's done a pretty good job from a pressure rate perspective, according to True Media, of keeping pressure off of Tua Tagovailoa. It's not just going to be about keeping the pressure off because the pressure might, cause some rush processes and things like that, or fudge up some of the timing on plays. They tend to get to the quarterback when they get that pressure. So it makes it even more important, even up against a low pressure defense, to keep that pressure off. And
Miami has significantly the last month reduced the average time to throw. They were uncharacteristically at 2.55, 2.6 seconds when there was a whole season in 23 where I think Tua averaged 2.28 seconds time to throw
That's
across
insane.
Like 600 dropbacks.
That's incredible.
Now, so what they've done is that they've started to manufacture more of the quick timing, quick hitters to the perimeter, middle screen, tight end delay type stuff. That they've brought a lot of that out. But his sack rate is higher at almost 6.5% than what it's been in any year he's played in the NFL since his rookie season in 2020. So even despite kind of the increased or the decreased pitch clock, if you will, they are conceding sacks at a higher rate than what they have historically for Tua Tagovailoa. So that can potentially be something that can swing the tide. We just about out of time, but would love to get a formal prediction out into the ethos for each one of us. So Ross, your final prediction and any final thoughts you have for this game in week 13.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. I think that this is the Dolphins game at home, 27-17. I hope the Saints very much enjoy their trip to South Florida and that it's a good trip for them, but I don't think that the game's going to be great for them. But I do think that there's an opportunity here, even in a loss, to at least generate some progress in terms of your offense, in terms of your own quarterback, all those other things. So the win for New Orleans doesn't come on the scoreboard, but it can come a little bit through what you still see in terms of the progress on the field. And of course, nothing wrong with protecting your draft position either. So I think that they're in a good space there.
There you go. There you go. I see this game similarly to you. I'm a little leery about a young team coming off a bye week where I could maybe see this team starting flat. I think that's going to be a major test for them. I think it'll be a little closer than you do. I have 24-16 as the final score in this game. I think Miami, they'll allow New Orleans to kind of move the ball, but maybe bow up in the red zone, force a few field goals in those situations. And that can potentially be the deciding factor here. But that is going to do it for us here on this Crossover Thursday. Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Dolphins. Ross Jackson of New Orleans Saints. It's your teams every day here on the Locked On Network. We will have you covered in the immediate aftermath of this game. So make sure you hit subscribe, whether you're listening on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We make it very easy for you to find us. We appreciate you for checking out this Crossover Thursday, and we hope to talk to you all again soon.